So these are the original grafting machines that we used. We had actually a dozen of these. The rest have gone up to Santa Rosa. But these tables were inside a room, one of the greenhouse rooms. And what we would do is we would take the vine prunings that we would take off the vines every winter anyway. We'd pull them out of the cold storage that they've been living in since they were pruned. Then we would rehydrate them overnight, and then we'd separate them out. So
rehydrate means you just put them in water.
yeah, it's really simple. You just dump them in water overnight and weight the top so that they stay submerged. So here are some of the grapevine cuttings. And these are all vinifera here. We pulled out our rootstock fields when we decommissioned the nursery ourselves because they have rootstock fields up north. So these are all vinifera, but I'll show you how the grafting works just the same. So I think this is a good just because it's usually what we pick because it's so vigorous. It has lots of nice canes. So what I'm going to do is cut these into single bud sections because each of these buds is enough to produce a new plant. So you can see here are 5 new buds. Any guesses as to why the one side's cut flat and one side's cut at an angle?
It's like you do with roses, isn't it? You're supposed to cut the stems when you put them in water diagonally.
It's actually not. That's a terrific guess, but it's not why. No, it's not that either. It's much simpler than that. It's just so that you know which way is up.
Oh.
It's the standard sort of nursery technique because, I mean, yes, you can see that the bud does angle up a little bit, but if you have to eyeball them all,
right,
you get a few wrong, and if you graft it upside down, it won't work.
Yeah.
So you just got to make sure that.
And you want them to work.
And you'd like them to work. You can put all this effort in, you'd like them to work. Okay, so let's pretend this is a rootstock. I would trim off the buds that the rootstock has itself, because I don't want it to spend any effort growing its own buds.
Right.
And then I would try to find a good match in terms of diameter. Looks pretty good. Maybe it's a little big. Looks good. Okay, so this is the grafting machine.
Whoa!
Sorry. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is put the wine grape into this grafting machine, and it's operated by a foot pedal under the table. I'm going to make a cut, and you see it holds onto the bud there, and snips off the bottom, and you can see the shape of the cut that it makes. It's called an omega graft, because the shape of the cut is the shape of the Greek letter omega. It's like a puzzle piece. It'll help it hold itself together. Then I'm going to get my my rootstock. I'm going to put that in, line up the bud, so I'm going to basically try to trick the rootstock into thinking that the bud that I'm grafting on belongs to it. Orient it in the same way. Make another cut. And when I pull my foot back, you'll see it'll push the top of this rootstock out of the way and replace it with the wine grape. And so you can see
Wow.
the graft.
Wow. It does. It looks just like a puzzle.
Yep. And the nice thing about this technique, as compared to, say, the traditional V graft, where you cut a V into the plant and a wedge notch into the other one, is that this holds itself together. Whereas with the traditional V graft, you've got to wrap it in order for it to hold it together.
It's like a tongue and groove in a drawer.
Yeah.
Exactly the same idea. Is that just that there's enough surface area that's touching and the shape is right that it just sort of holds together on its own. So at this point, what we would do is we would pack it in soil, along with 500 other little vines just like it. Pack it in soil, keep the soil moist, and keep it warm. And we have we had a room which we kept at 80% humidity and 80 degrees, and we'd leave it in there for about 3 weeks. At the end of the 3 weeks, we'd take that out. We'd separate the vines out, and we'd look for 2 things. The first would be the formation of a callus, basically a scar around the outside of the graft union. The other would be the growth of roots out of the bottom. And if we saw both of those, then we'd know that it was viable, and we get roughly 90% take up to that point. And then we would dip this in wax, just to keep it from drying out, and then pot it up in a black plastic pot, kind of like this one. So you can see right here is the graft, and You can see that sort of grafting scar already. And this is the wax that's on. And then it'll push right through, the bud will push right through the wax and start growing. And within, you basically gradually harden it off by, first you're in a temperature and humidity controlled greenhouse, then you go into just a temperature controlled greenhouse, then you go just under shade cloth, and eventually you go outside to get it used to the outside world. The whole process takes roughly 2 or 3 months, and then it's ready to plant.
And when you graft over existing vines, say Roussan to Syrah, you do a version of this process, but you do the grafting right on the plant that's in the ground already?
Yeah, what you do basically is you will saw off the top of the. So here, I'll show you. Basically, show you what it would look like with one of these guys.
Okay.
So what you do is you would, when it's dormant, you would saw off the top of the vine, and then you'd cut notches, 2 notches, one on each side, and then you would put your single bud with that point on it into that notch, and then you'd wrap it.
And you do that in January?
Yeah. You do it in the middle, sort of late winter, probably more likely like March.
Wow.
And you don't get quite the same take that you do when you do it in here.
It's more fragile.
It's a little more fragile,
vulnerable.
Yeah.
But
and it's a very
it works
specialized
often
skill
enough.
too. It works most of the time. You still probably get 80% take of each bud. So sometimes you have to go back and graft on a second one the next year, or that one that came up, you're going to then split it and set it out into the 2 cordons anyway.
I've always wondered about rootstock itself and about, which is sort of hundreds, thousands of year evolutionary process. But when you first planted here, for example, you didn't plant on rootstock, or did you? You just planted whatever variety you wanted.
No, we planted on rootstock.
And how did you decide what the rootstock was?
We re-imported rootstocks from France also. I mean, the rootstocks, they have to be genetically North American stuff because it's the North American grapevine, grape varieties that are resistant to phylloxera. But the French over the last century have done a lot of work in taking these originally American rootstock clones and breeding them for certain characteristics. So there's some which are good for droughty soils, some which are good for calcareous soils, others that are good for higher vigor. I mean, basically you can match the varieties to your site with the rootstock. So we're basically looking for rootstocks that are relatively high vigor because the landscape is challenging. There's not a lot of soil. We need ones that are tolerant of drought, and we need ones that are tolerant of calcium, because that's what the calcium carbonate is what the limestone's made of. So there's a handful of different rootstocks that fit those criteria, and then beyond that we try to match up ones that are right for each varietal. So Syrah and Mourvedre are both fairly picky about rootstocks, so there's some common rootstocks that they won't graft onto successfully. So you basically take within the ones that will work for your area, you try to find the ones that are going to be the best fits for each variety.